Danny's hit record. So we'll be starting tonight's webinar as of now, opportunities for young people in community broadcasting. Thank you so much to Annette, Dylan, Maddie and Michael who've joined us so far tonight. Molly, George will be hosting tonight's webinar, who's our brand new youth representative for the CBAA. Molly, I'll just get you to bring up the slideshow on your page. That would be great if you could share that. We'll sort of kick things off very shortly, but I thought I'd just sort of say hi and introduce myself as I'll be here hosting on the CBAA side of things. Got Mr. Danny Chifley in the house too, who'll be on tech support and jumping in to the chat to post some handy resources as we go along. But of course, this webinar is also being recorded for our website, so you'll be able to get a copy of it. But also, we really wanted to design a webinar tonight, like we do with all our webinars, that can be watched again later. But I think particularly this one was really important for Molly and I to have a look at how we could design the webinar so not only you as young people can take it and learn from it, obviously, because that's its primary benefit. But also we really wanted to design a webinar and a resource that we could share with stations, and that stations might be able to then share with their young people sort of as a training resource or something like that. So hopefully there's lots of great things in here tonight about different opportunities available to you. Please feel free to jump in the chat at any point if you've got any questions. We'd be more than happy to answer them. And this webinar also comes off the back of the young people, the Youth in Community Radio Forum, which happens at the CBAA Conference every year in November. So we had some great chats in that about different challenges and things for young people in community radio, different opportunities. And again, we wanted to redesign this webinar slightly to sort of hopefully answer some of those questions. So I'm going to pass to Molly very soon. Right now I'll introduce her. As I said, she's our brand new youth representative, but I'll pop her on the mic and get her to introduce herself as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Molly, as Holly just said, and thanks very much, Holly, for the intro. Myself and Holly, and also with input from the rest of the CBAA staff, have designed this, as Holly said, as a way to discuss about the opportunities that are available across the sector for young people, as well as some tips and perhaps like tricks that stations could start offering if there are some young people that have started to volunteer at their stations and they're a little bit unsure as to how to include them and stuff like that. I've had a bit of a brainstorm myself, so I'll just give you a little bit of a background, and I might just go down this, and I can't be bothered putting it on like full screen, so I'm really sorry. Hopefully this is adequate. But yeah, basically, as I said, it's just a follow-on from the youth forum that we had at conference. But usually these webinars are held as like a sort of a follow-on to continue the conversation. And this is that, but it's also a bit more of a like standalone resource and sharing platform, if you will. So we would really love to get your input on things as well. In the next couple of slides, I have some questions for you that I'd love you to add in the chat box, but I'll get to that in a moment. So I'll just give you guys a bit more of an introduction. There's me. It's a pretty cute photo. I hope you like my earrings. So a bit of background about me. I am the Pathways Manager at SYN in Melbourne. The Pathways Manager probably doesn't mean that much to a lot of you guys, but basically it means I'm the volunteer manager. So I'm responsible for a lot of the programs that help our volunteers do professional development, upskill, get them really quickly into SYN and volunteering. Pretty much if you're a volunteer at SYN, you've had an email from me at some point or another. So Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Please comment and say that you like my earrings. Or if you don't, I mean, you can give me feedback. That's fine. Thanks, Danny. So yeah, I've been working at SYN for about just a bit over a year, almost 18 months now. And I come from a bit of a different background than a lot of other people who are in broadcast. So I'm not actually a broadcaster. I broadcasted for about 6 months at SYN before 6 to 9 months at SYN before I jumped into this role. But I've done a bit of arts management sort of before, and actually where my passions lie is young people. And so whilst I really love radio and I'm really, really passionate about having platforms for broadcast, my passions lie in supporting young people and giving them the best opportunity to promote themselves, to have a voice and to be the best that they can be. So yeah, that's a bit about me, and that's my email if you guys want to get in touch with me after this webinar. Cool. So I'm just going to move right along. I have some questions that I want to throw to you guys, oh, sorry, I've got a question here from Danny, and it says, when and how has your station involved? Oh, wait, no, that's my questions. I'm so sorry. Cool. All right, so I have some questions now so basically I want you guys to answer in the chat box below. So when and how has your station involved young people? If you are a young person here tonight, first of all, welcome. And second of all, have you encountered any frustrations or grievances at your station? And if so, what was it? Alternatively, if you've had any positive experiences at your station, what has made it so positive? And another question that I also want to ask is, what is one thing that the sector could do to support you as a young person? I want Danny's put that in the chat box for me, which is really great. If you all sort of want to ruminate on those and type in some answers, I think we might move right along, but I'd really love to come back to those and hear your stories as well, because obviously I come from SYN, which has a really different focus to a lot of other stations in regards to how we involve our volunteers and stuff like that. And I can definitely learn a lot from hearing other people's stories about their own stations and how they operate. Cool. So this next slide is best spoken about by Holly. So I might just throw it back to you and then I'll follow on after that.
Holy moly, who came up with that? Thanks, Molly. So we thought we'd start the webinar by going through a few sector opportunities for young people. These are ones that are particularly sort of initiatives of the CBAA and or partners. But just wanted to, I think, give, volunteering at a station is so important, and obviously that's why we're all here, I think, because we got into community radio that way. But there's lots of other really exciting opportunities on maybe on a more national level or an interstate level. So I just wanted to start by flagging some of those. So I'll get into it. So the first one there is NFDS, or the National Features and Documentary Series. So that's an annual partnership run by the CBAA and the Community Media Training Organisation. And we developed 8 to 10 new and emerging producers to make long-form documentary series. So they'll come to Sydney, CMTO will deliver some training, we'll set you up with a mentor, and over the course of several weeks, you'll get to produce a full-length feature. So that's a really exciting initiative. We've just finished this year's, but applications will open early next year for 2019. So please keep an eye on that. Again, if you like content, we just wanted to flag a few of the national community radio flagship programs. So CRN, that is the Community Radio Network. That's a national content distribution service, again, run out of the CBAA here in Sydney, but about 120 stations across the country share content on that satellite and also take content from that service. Your station might be one of them. So I can see Michael here's from 2Arm in Armidale. They take some content from the CRM, for example. So there's a few national programs which are always looking for contributors, and particularly from people who aren't necessarily in a capital city. You know, something like The Wire, which is the national news and current affairs show. They've got studios or people producing out of 2SER in Sydney, 4EB in Brisbane, and Radio Adelaide in Adelaide, but are always looking, and particularly looking, for ideas and stories and pitches for people who aren't necessarily at one of those community radio stations. So you can head to the Wire's website, and Danny might put that link in the chat box. But you can head to the Wire's website, and there's a little pitch button in the top corner if you have a story idea. There's also Fair Comment, which is a grassroots, more sort of community interviews and events national program. And All the Best, which is creative audio, documentary, fiction, and storytelling. So it really focuses on Australian stories. That's sort of run out of a couple of stations in Sydney and Melbourne, but again, they're always looking for people all across Australia to contribute. And Good Morning Country, which is the national country music show. So I know there's a lot of young people involved in country music, although people tell me otherwise. And while there's on-air opportunity, there's also opportunities for production or digital social media sort of volunteering there as well. All the Best, which again I mentioned before, they're looking for some supervising producers, and we might find the link for that and pop that in the chat box as well. If you want to do some more content stuff, but maybe not on air, the CBAA produces a biannual magazine called CBX. It's a sector magazine where we focus on really exciting stories and pieces about community radio. It goes to about we produce about 1,500 copies twice a year, and they go to politicians, stations like yourselves, university lecturers and things like this. And we're always looking for people who might want to brush up on their writing skills and get some experience writing for a magazine like that. So if you are interested, please just let me know, and we can definitely put down your interest for the April edition. There's a Deutsche Welle internship, which is a national partnership internship we've been doing for a very long time with Deutsche Welle, which is Germany's public broadcaster. So each year we look for 1 or 2, sometimes 3 candidates who have community radio background, who have newsroom experience, and who speak German, and they get a 3-month paid internship in Bonn. So again, applications will open for that early next year. Sometimes people don't always speak German or don't always have newsroom experience. So if you maybe tick 2 of those 3 categories and you want to know more information, again, just give us a call. It'd be great to see your applications in there, and we can talk through if you're scared you don't quite meet the criteria or anything like this. We've also got the CBAA job board on our website where we post volunteer opportunities, but also paid jobs in community media, because I know that's a big thing that some people really strive to get there, and there could be at stations all across the country. So if that's sort of a pathway that you're looking for, I'd highly recommend the CBAA job board. And the last dot point there says keep an eye out on CBAA social media and e-news for the latest opportunities. We'll show you where you can sign up for the CBAA e-news if you don't already get it, because there we try and pack in as many paid jobs, grants, opportunities that might be of interest to young people, but also everyone in the sector. And that's a fortnightly newsletter. There's also the CBAA Community Radio Awards. So we have particular ones for young people, like Young Volunteer of the Year. And CBF funding. So CBF is the Community Broadcasting Foundation. They deliver funding for the entire sector, and I wanted to put them in there because they have a huge portion of their funding dedicated particularly for content. So if you have a great idea for a content piece that you want to do at your station, be that a new show or a youth program particular or anything it might be, talk to your station about applying for CBF funding. They really are wanting to support really new and creative content initiatives. That could even be like video or social media or a sort of iteration of a multi-channel thing, if that interests you. The funding grant rounds for that will open in January of 2019. So definitely want to start thinking about if you've got something, a new initiative bubbling away. Equally, if you want to run some training at your station, obviously get in touch with the Community Media Training Organisation, but you can also get sort of funding through the CBF for training for particular initiatives for young people and things like that. So these are just a few. I think later in the presentation we'll touch on a few other stations that have particularly really good youth programs that we know of. We know there's many, many more doing that. So yeah, just wanted to flag a few opportunities, but I'll pass it back over to Molly.
Thanks, Holly. Before I go on to the next slide, I just wanted to reference back to a couple of people who commented in the chat box. Thanks so much for that. So Michael Keane wrote, I'm only new to ARM, which I just found out is in Armidale, which in New South Wales, which is kind of cute. I'm going there for Christmas, so maybe I'll have to tune in. That you've been there for under 1 year, and so you're not so experienced, but you have a couple of intellectually disabled younger people who do shows and are accompanied by the carers. This works really well. That's really awesome. I have a question for you. What kind of shows do they do? Are they integrated into other shows, or do they have their own separate show? And from Annette at 5GTRFM, they have a youth group, which is also in Mount Gambier, where they have a youth group where young presenters can have their views put across. I have another question on that. What do you mean by views put across? Are they also presenting? Oh, you said young presenters, of course. So is it just a youth show that you have at a certain time of day? And if so, that's really awesome. Youth shows are always my favourite ones, particularly the school group ones. I'm going to move right along. So the next couple of slides, I'll just refer back. Michael just said that they have their own show. They have a mic set up, which is really awesome. Cool. If you can comment the name of that show, I'd really love to do a little bit of research on that and learn a little bit more about what you guys are doing there. That sounds really great. Cool. So the next couple of slides, I ruminated on a whole bunch of things that not only came from the youth forum at conference, but also from discussions with my colleagues at SYN and also sort of within the wider sector, as well as my own brain. And so these are some things that I think that stations could start doing to assist young people that come to their stations. I want to just state before I go into all of these is that I'm from SYN, and it's been a very specific youth focus for its existence, and that we only let people broadcast if they are under the age of 26. Not only that, our focus is more on our volunteers as opposed to our listeners. So I want to just state that we have a really different focus to a lot of other stations, and thus, like, my knowledge base is limited from that. But also, you know, I'm a bit more of an expert when it comes to young people and actually engaging them as volunteers. So I just wanted to state that before I went into this. So in regards to content ideas that stations could start offering to young people, a youth week or a youth day at the station where lots of young people are featured throughout the day for the broadcast. I looked it up, and National Youth Week comes up in early April. So if that's something that you're really interested in doing, you know, have a bit of time to prepare for that. It's early to mid-April. The exact dates are a bit different from state to state, but more or less it's from early to mid-April. So that's something that you could sort of think forward to. Encouraging the young people to get involved in your station to bring their friends to volunteer. If you're one young person at a rural or regional station, it can be really intimidating to be there with other people who, you know, the next youngest person is in their 40s or something like that. So giving them active encouragement and also encouraging them to bring other friends along is really important. And just on that sort of encouragement, there's a couple of notes that I have to the side here for myself to mention. When you are working with a young person, I think firstly it's really important to remember why you yourself got into community broadcasting in the first place, and remember what you wanted to get out of it, and think, sort of put yourself in the young person's shoes at that point. If you're, obviously we all are really passionate about community broadcast in one way or another, and that could really help to be a bit more empathetic, particularly if you're someone who is older and hasn't had a huge amount of contact with young people in recent times. And the other one is obviously stigmatizing and stereotyping young people with assumptions. That can be really isolating. I mean, this is a funny story, but I do remember, not this year, but last year at conference when we were presenting, someone asked a really good question and then followed it up with, I don't understand young people, they all play Pokemon Go, which I resented because firstly, Pokemon Go was a really innovative game, but secondly, you know, not all young people are really interested in Pokemon Go or games or being on social media, and that's really limiting. So just to keep that in mind when you're engaging with young people, of course, as you would with anyone. So the next points have moved down. Giving young people autonomy over their programs. So not deciding content that they... sorry, I have to refer back to the chat box for a minute. Michael and Maddie both just said Pokemon Go rules. Thank you very much for your support. It really does. It's a very innovative game. Enough about Pokemon Go. So yeah, giving young people autonomy over their programs, not deciding the content for them. That's really important. If you give a young person ownership over what they want to broadcast, they're going to be more interested in it. If you tell them what to broadcast, it's probably not going to be very interesting for them and they're not going to engage. So giving them the autonomy to really take their ideas and helping champion them, I suppose, to pull a, what is it, MasterChef reference, like champion the ingredient, champion the young people, of course. What's the next one? So youth run volunteer events, giving young people, once again, autonomy and guiding them through that. Quite often young people actually have a lot of ideas, particularly when running events, and they have a lot of friends who would want to join in, as well as a lot of ideas. So that's something that is also really important. Connecting young people with other people in the station who have similar interests to them, but not just other young people. So, of course, like, people are more comfortable spending other times with people in their own age group typically, but, you know, don't just put a young person in a show with another young person just because they're young. You know, there might be someone who is really, really interested in soul music, for example, and there might be a show that does soul music, but the presenter is 50, but there's a common interest there. So connecting those things are really important as opposed to just age. And the last one that I've got on regards to content is to have a youth allocated spot on the grid to be filled each week with young broadcasters. So this is something, particularly at larger metro stations, that can be an issue, is that there's no space on the grid for them to, for people to come on, let alone young people. And young people are really probably the most up against this because they don't have as much experience. So if you just have 1 hour a week, that is the spot for young people to come in and have a go, then that will help bring new broadcasters in, and it will also help those young people get experience on the grid. It's really hard for people to get experience, or if someone else is telling them that they have to go somewhere else and get experience. So, you know, it's a bit of a silly cycle, I suppose. So, yeah, just allocating one spot on the grid for someone else for young people to fill it when they come around is really important.
And I'm just going to jump in there quickly, Molly. And Nat from 5GTR has a great example from her station about their youth group is more about getting their young presenters thinking about how they can improve their programs, and if they have ideas about how the station can help them have more input into content and training. We also allow them to have their friends come into the station to see how it all works, and then they have their programs after school, which is drive time, which they dedicate to their youth. So I think alongside the content portion of that, the youth group idea is great. That gives the young people autonomy, a space to experiment, share ideas, and get more people in there. So, Annette, thanks for sharing. I think that's a really great initiative.
There's also a couple more as I go down there. Maddie said that was a really great point. It's really important to trust young people and give them space to develop their ideas. Thanks very much for the support. I've watched older presenters having trouble letting go of, sorry, I'm just going to go down, of control with younger volunteers in the past. And as actually I put it, it's later in the presentation, but I'll say it now because you mentioned it, Maddie. 2RRR, their drive shows are run by young people, which is really great. So from Sarah, she's the youngest presenter at 1FM in Shepparton. I'm surrounded by many people above the age of 30, and due to my love of music from the 50s to the 80s, I'm able to connect with them better. It's greatly supported. I'm greatly supported by everyone there. That's really, really awesome to hear. And also that obviously they haven't put you just in the box of you're a young person, hang out with other young people, that they've actually thought of you and your, you know, likes and dislikes, which is, you know, sometimes I would assume it to be, you know, common practice, but you know, sometimes it's not. So, and then we also have Dylan, who is from Wonky Radio, which is also mentioned a little bit later on in the presentation. They have 8 hours a week of youth programming. We also have built a relationship with the 2 local high schools who are both producing weekly radio programs. We are currently working with SIN to create a training program that we can run within the schools. Yeah, we're really excited about that, Dylan. Thanks for mentioning that. I can't wait to see where that goes in 2019. And then Annette also added that 5 GTR FM, we also give our youth training on production and other avenues that they're interested in. It sounds like 5 GTR FM is giving young people a lot of autonomy and doing a lot of listening, which is really, really awesome. So thanks for sharing that. Cool. I am going to move right along. So the next part of this presentation I put towards professional development. So a lot of these points came up at forum as well. So I'll just sort of move right along there. The first point is cheaper or shorter training for young people. So often the training courses can be super, super long and very, very expensive. I can only speak for SIN because this is where I work. But at SIN, our training course is actually 2 days. It's not eight sessions or over 8 weeks. We do it over 2 weeks. It's 2 days and it costs $99. That's inclusive of your membership for the year. That basically means that we can get people in quickly, which is really good for us because young people, there's a lot of high turnover. But it also means that it's really, really accessible. And so if there is a way that perhaps stations could offer a scholarship to young people in regards to training or find a way in your budgets to make it cheaper, that really does help get more young people. A lot of training that is, you know, in the multiple hundreds is really difficult for young people to justify to pay that, but it doesn't mean that they're not interested in getting involved. Also, board and management internships. Once again, I can only talk for SIN, but we do have a board internship that happens each year. We take on 3 young volunteers who are interested in governance to sit in on board meetings for, Campbell's here, who is my boss, so he can probably speak on it a little bit more because he actually goes to the meetings, but I think it's about 3 months, maybe longer. So that has been really successful, and quite a lot of those people who do that internship end up being the board and actually eventually the board president. And SIN is one organisation that our board president has to be under the age of 26 at the time of elections. So that works really well for us. Shows that involve school groups and classes during the day. We do this at SIN with Schools on Air. It's a really, really great program. If you're in Melbourne, please tune in. Quite often they have really interesting discussions about what favourite colour shoes they like the best. It's pretty good content there. But it's also a really good way to involve young people that are sort of there all together. As Dylan did mention, that's one thing that they've been doing at their station, which is really, really awesome. If you want any more guidance on that, or if it's something that you're interested in, please get in contact with me. I can get you in contact with our training and development manager, and perhaps there could be some advising there. One thing that I am also in charge of at SYN is hosting work experience students. My apologies. And that basically means that they come for a week, they get some experience, and we make sure that they get lots of time on air to practice with other young people. It's been really, really successful. In fact, I think we got a 9 out of 10 on the Will You Come Back to SYN? And a lot of those young people are currently volunteering from that. So it's a really good way to get young people in, keep them there. If you want any resources on how to schedule that week, or you're interested more in that, please email me. It's something that I've worked really hard on this year. So, and it's been a really great program. Mentoring programs, tech mentoring programs, which was also brought up at conference. I think what was mentioned was that maybe older tech volunteers and people who are very, very experienced in tech could have a young person shadow them and learn the ropes as a sort of internship. So that could also mean that knowledge isn't lost when, older people who are very experienced in tech aren't able to do the job anymore. So that is one thing that we thought would be a really great idea. And also shadowing senior management for training. That one also came up at conference. That's a really good way to get young people experienced, also to perhaps have an assistant whilst you work, but then to get them a bit more understanding on what happens in the day-to-day work at stations, and what is actually involves being in those senior management positions at stations. So those are my suggestions. If you have any others, please put them in the chat box. I'll just refer back quickly. Campbell said that it's a really great way to get new people on board. Thanks for following up that, Campbell. Michael said, I believe that their training is free at 2 ARM, but they're a small regional station. It's quite simple one-on-one in-house training though, so it covers the use of the panel broadcasting standards, etc. Great that your training is free. I think Holly or someone else is going to chime in.
Yes, I'm going to chime in very quickly. Just on professional development, I think that the value of it can't be understated for all types of organizations and all types of workplaces. I think it's something we're a lot more across in potentially places. I know a lot of people here would be volunteers. If not, everyone in this room volunteers, and if you're not, probably at stations where it is all volunteers. So I think we understand professional development from an organizational level where you're, a paid employee and people pay to send you on professional development opportunities. But I can't understate the importance of professional development opportunities even at a volunteer-run community station. I know financial budget restraints are the most challenging aspect of that, but by providing professional development, that's obviously when you're getting people staying for the long term. Molly's provided some really good examples of ways that you can run them in-house. But a couple more I just wanted to mention are, again, CMTO, the Community Media Training Organization. If potentially there's a specific aspect you want training on, say governance or social media or things like this, contact the CMTO and they can organize subsidized training for your station. That could be one way to maybe do an annual professional development something for all your staff or senior volunteers or board or however it might be at your station. And the other thing I just wanted to mention are sector conferences are another great professional development opportunity. So obviously there's the CBAAs each year in November, but if you're from an ethnic station, there's the NEMBC conference, the National Ethnic Multicultural Broadcaster Council conference, generally also in November. If you're from a First Nations station or you identify as an Indigenous person, there's also the First Nations Australia conference, which happens once or twice a year, and things like these. And there's obviously a lot of hands-on training opportunities at those conferences, opportunities to meet people and things like this. So if that's something you want to do, or as a attendee at your station or as a board you want to implement that for your station, I'd encourage considering putting it into your annual budget and your annual planning to try and send 1 to however many people you can afford to something like that. Thanks, Molly.
Cool, thank you. Thanks for that. And I just also want to add that Maddie did comment saying that the training is free from the CMTO and has added the link there. So if that's something that you're interested in, please click the link and check that out. Cool. I'll move on to the next one. So the next section is about obviously stations and resources. They were on the same page, but then I had too many resources, so I had to move them over. This one is basically just mentioning stations that are really good at engaging young people, but also in different ways from one another. So if you are looking for any advice or whatever, getting in contact with these stations is really important. They, in one way or another, do engage with young people, and so they would be really good resources for different things. Of course, I put SIN first because it's where I work, but yeah, we are a really good resource in regards to training young people as well as engaging volunteers, and not only that, just having a really good volunteer culture across the board. So please, as I said, get in contact with me if you have any questions in regards to any of the volunteer programs that we run that at SIN. FBI, which is obviously in Sydney, they are a youth station, but they have a bit more of a different focus than SIN does. They do focus more on their content, but they have a lot of ways in which they make sure that young people are trained and allowed spaces on the grid. So they're a different focus, more content focused, but really, really good resource. Edge Radio in Hobart is also another youth station that's worked with SIN in the past. Fresh 92.7 is Adelaide's youth station. They focus a bit more on dance music and have a bit of a different focus to us, but a lot of great presenters come out of Fresh 92.7. 2RRR in Sydney, which has Youth Jukebox, which is their drive show. And they also, when I got sent through some information today, said that they also regularly secure youth opportunities grants from the New South Wales government to offer scholarships to in-house radio training courses, which is run by Steve Ahern. And they prioritise young people diverse in gender, ability, sexual orientation, cultural and linguistic background. So but going back to the other suggestions that we did a couple of slides before, scholarships are a really great way to get more young people involved, particularly if they fall under the margins that we just talked about, either gender, ability, sexual orientation, cultural or linguistic background. And some other stations that I know and that we've worked with that are really, really good at engaging young people are 2RRR in Sydney, of course, 8CCC in Alice Springs. The station manager, Ben, I've been in contact with him a little bit over this year, and they have a lot of young people that sort of rotate really quickly. And so the changing landscape that often happens when having lots of young people at a station, they're really used to. Wonky Radio in Fitzroy Crossing, which is obviously where Dylan's from, 2Bob in Taree, and Tune FM, which is also in Armidale. They're a student radio station at the University of New England, and I know that their way of engaging and supporting volunteers is pretty similar to SIN's, which we are really excited about. So they're really great. I'll move along to the next one. This is just a list of some resources, mostly from the CBAA, that can also help you in engaging young people. The 5 tips for engaging young people at your station, that was an article that was done a little bit ago, a couple of years ago, by the previous, a couple of youth board, someone who's in my position at Go, Tess Lawley, who also used to work at SIN. The National Standards of Volunteer Involvement is there, as well as what is non-for-profit law when it comes to volunteers. 2RRR, they've added a guide for how they involve youth, which I thought was really important to put in there. And then the CBAA is also their child protection toolkit. So that's specific for working with under 18s. That's probably detailing a bit about working with children's check and stuff. So Please do check that out. If you do have people who are under the age of 18, it's really important for you to be across that. And lastly, if you're under the age of 26, please join the Young People in Community Media, a community radio Facebook group. I've just been made an admin, so I'll accept you. Cool. I'll move on to the next slide, which is basically if anybody has any questions for what we've discussed tonight, please put them in the chat box. I think it's been a really great discussion so far, and I'd love to answer any questions that you have. I might just wait a moment to see if they roll in. And while we're doing that, Maddie just commented also saying that 2UP secured a grant to employ a youth manager, if I'm not mistaken. Very cool. Thank you for that. I didn't know that. Do you know who that person is? Because that would be really awesome to know.
Yeah, she was in the D session. I will remember her name and I'll let you know. But
Maybe just posted. It said Sarah.
oh yeah, Sarah.
Yes,
Yes, she was.
We talked at. She was at conference. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool. Beauty. Cool. Well,
I was also just going to jump in there really quickly. I know you mentioned it briefly, but about the health check, not the health check. Oh my God, the child protection toolkit. Sorry, I'm thinking two different things in my mind. But in regards to that, we didn't touch on obviously the regulatory challenges around or opportunities around employing or getting young volunteers at your station. That is obviously a whole other topic for a whole other webinar. But that toolkit that we linked to is fabulous. It came out in 2017 after the Royal Commission into child abuse. So it's up to date. It's written by a lawyer. So it's got brand new factual information because some states did change their legislation after that, Melbourne being the first, Victoria being the first. So it breaks it down state by state what your requirements are for your station in regards to do you need health check, oh my God, I keep saying health checks, working with children checks, police checks, these kinds of things. So if that's something you want to explore more or haven't checked it out in a while, please have a look at that resource because it's really great, and we will collate all these links and send them out in an email to those that attended the webinar and pop them on their website as well after the event.
Okay. Holly, Michael's just asked a question in the chat box, which I actually think might be better to you guys at the CBAA.
Yes, that's a great question. I love this question. It's a very good one, Michael, and we do get it all the time. So the question is, I have a question, Ree, what music sources young people can use? They're likely to want to use Spotify, YouTube, but I'm not sure this is legally allowed yet. You're very correct, and many people all around the sector are wanting to and are using Spotify and YouTube, SoundCloud, any of these things to stream online. And you are also correct that it is not allowed. So the requirements, the terms of services for something like Spotify, it's specifically for personal use only, so that it does not allow you to rebroadcast on air. And that's equally the same as YouTube. So you cannot use those services to broadcast straight to air. Also, the quality is terrible, other than the legal implication there. So we definitely don't recommend it. The biggest thing that we would recommend is AMRAP, as you've rightly said there. So AMRAP is the Australian Music Radio Airplay project based here. It's one of the CBAA services, and it provides all community broadcasters with free access to brand new Australian music. So if you don't use AMRAP, or your young people at your station don't use AMRAP, we really highly suggest that you get an account. You can search by whichever genre that you're interested in, and you can get that via CD or via online. Danny's also posted another article about sourcing music the legal and safe way. It's a couple years old. It mentions like Big Pond Music, which doesn't exist anymore, but ultimately you have to purchase it. Obviously there's AMRAP, but then you have to purchase it, whether that's a CD, an MP3, a vinyl. Community broadcasting stations, broadcasters can also bring their CDs from home or their vinyls or their MP3s and add it to the community radio station's library. So we do have that permission as community broadcasters, which is really cool. So you can always encourage broadcasters to bring in music too and share that as well. But I know there are some barriers that, when people don't have financial resources and things like that. So if you want more advice or anything, please don't hesitate to give myself or Danny a call, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, 0293102999. We're also available on email to answer all these kinds of curly questions.
And Michael's also just asked a follow-up question. I'm not sure if you just answered there. Sorry if you have. How about Apple Music purchases?
Yep, that's totally fine. So again, anything that's legally purchased, you are more than welcome to play on air. Apple, so if it comes through iTunes, you're obviously getting good quality there, so you don't need to worry about that. But yeah, if you're unsure, the general rule of thumb is to make sure you have you purchase it or you have the copyright holder's permission. So for example, obviously if somebody sent you a demo into the station on a CD, then obviously you have that person's permission to play it.
Cool. And Maddie just asked a question. So we touched on this a little during the professional in professional development. But Molly, what do you think about the importance of including young people in decision-making processes, i.e. talking to or sitting on station boards, committees, etc.? We've just added some younger people to our program committee at 2RRR, including myself, which I think has made a huge difference. Yeah, I think it's really, really important, not only from a professional development side of things, but also from a perspective side of things. Quite often, if there aren't any young voices in the room, issues that do affect young people are going to be overlooked, and that's also not just similar for young people, but for any people who are a bit more marginalised. So yeah, I think it is really important, which is why we at SYN we do have that board internship, and we do advocate for having those younger voices heard. I mean, younger voices heard at SYN, we're only young people really, but at other stations that are predominantly older people, yeah, I agree, it's very, very important. I have a question just back to you. Yeah, what difference do you think has it made? Like, what impact have you seen? I'll give you a moment to write your answer, but yeah, I'm glad that you have seen a difference. Cool.
Yeah, as she's just typing, I'll jump in and I say that we here at the CBAA definitely agree that it's important to have all types of people from your community represented in the decision-making processes. So if you're at a small generalist station in a regional country town, there's young people in your community, there's people from different backgrounds potentially or different faiths. So, it's very important to have those people represented in the operations as well as on air. And that's also, a requirement under your license conditions and in the codes of practice to have those different voices involved. And I think Maddie's just said something. I think young people and also marginalised people have different priorities for broadcasting, which means we approach programming in a very different way. Perspectives are so important. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think also that Molly touched on this before, but I'll reiterate again that it's so important to provide these pathways into operations, programming committees, decision-making positions, boards, all of these things, but ensure that the support's there as well. There's one thing to have a position, but whether that's setting somebody up with a mentor or just a friendly face on the board or the committee that they can go to if they have questions, making sure that they're given that autonomy, but that support too on their journey.
And yeah, just on that, I think to add to to advocate for young people, that young people are actually quite flexible. That's one thing that we find is that you have an idea that you can offer to young people, and they're really often quite open at changing or altering something because they haven't been doing it for a really, really long time. So if I'm going to sort of advocate as to why it's really important to get younger people in that perspective, but also that they tend to be quite flexible and won't really kick up a fuss about a change of process so much, because they are learning and it's exciting to learn. That's my experience in that as well. Obviously, that's not going to happen for everyone. Everyone's an individual. But yeah, I am all for having more young people involved in operations, on boards, and volunteering, of course. Cool. Well, I suppose if there aren't any more questions, I'll put. Thanks, guys, for joining us. It's been a really interesting discussion. I loved everybody who's added in all of their points and contributed to the chat. I think that's been really valuable. Yeah, am I supposed to do anything else to finish us off, Holly?
Thank you so much, Molly. Thank you so much for your insights tonight and your contribution so far in your new role. Thank you all the attendees for coming. I've just put my email address in the chat box. If you've got any questions about anything that we've talked about tonight, or anything community radio related, young people, etc., please feel free to hit me up. Molly's also put her address in there, so if you've got more connecting with young people questions, or you want to get ideas about anything we discussed tonight in further detail, please hit up Molly. Annette, thank you so much for coming, and we're glad you found it interesting. We will send, as I mentioned earlier, we will send out an email with the webinar recording, so please share it with young people and your station. Please hold on to it as an ongoing resource if you found it useful, or if you think your station will find it useful. We'll send out the myriad of links and resources as well, so you have them at hand. And yeah, we'll have some more webinars coming up in 2019, of course. We do not have the names of those titles yet, but they will be here, and we will have more monthly trainings for you. So as I said, please sign up to the CBAA news, which comes out fortnightly. And if I don't speak to you all, have a lovely end of year celebration, whatever that may be. And we'll see you all in the new year. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for tuning in as well. Thank you for all the thanks as well. There's lots of thanks happening.